The Emmy Rose is seen here just a few weeks ago docking in Gloucester. The 82-foot fishing vessel is based out of Portland, Maine, but stopped at Fisherman's Wharf weekly to unload its latest catch.
The Emmy Rose goes out fishing between 3 to 7 day trips.
Nick Gigaloni is co-owner of Fisherman's Wharf Gloucester. He says the Emmy Rose was scheduled to stop here this morning.
I talked to the captain around 8:30, 9 o'clock last night, got a hail from him, told me what time he'd be there, set everything up.
But around 1 a.m., the Coast Guard received a signal from the vessel's emergency beacon. A call to the boat's satellite phone went unanswered.
We began searching as soon as we could. We had multiple assets respond.
The Coast Guard launched a search by water and by air.
They found the debris field and an empty life raft. As of now, there are no signs of the vessel or the people that were on board.
The terrible truth about this industry.
Today at Fisherman's Wharf in Gloucester, a sense of sadness mixed with hope.
Making their last trip before Thanksgiving and this happens, just an absolute tragedy.
Fishing has always been a dangerous industry. Even with improvements in technology, emergency location devices, life rafts, and survival suits, the quest for seafood has pushed fishermen farther out to sea in often treacherous and unpredictable weather. The Emmy Rose disappeared at a time when the wind was gusting to 30 miles an hour and the seas were reportedly 6 to 8 feet. Conditions severe enough to force a Coast Guard rescue helicopter to return to base. The Emmy Rose sank on November 23rd, 2020, roughly 22 miles northeast of Provincetown, Massachusetts, taking with it 4 beloved crew members. It was discovered 6 months later. The Insider Exclusive's Justice in America news team is on location in Gloucester, Massachusetts, to take you behind the scenes in this new network TV special, Justice in America, Michael Porper Jr.'s story, to examine how Orlando and Associates successfully got justice for Michael Porper's family in this tragedy that stunned the local fishing community. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Gloucester, Massachusetts. It is my great pleasure to introduce Joseph Orlando Jr. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Tell our audience a little bit about what your law firm practices, what type of cases.
Sure. So we are personal injury attorneys, and we have a specialty in maritime personal injury that often presents itself as a claim for injured fishermen or other seagoing workers, merchant marines, other fixed platform workers like on oil rigs, cargo ships, things like that. Someone who gets injured doing the work traditionally done by a seaman.
How is the fishing industry these days in your town?
Well, here in Gloucester, it's not what it used to be. The regulatory environment has been very, very difficult on our industry, the ground fishery. We used to have 300 or 400 trawlers here in Gloucester, and we might have a couple of dozen left at this point.
And they're all owned by major corporations now, right?
At this point, corporate interests have taken over most of the vessels. There's a good lobster boat industry, and those are usually individually owned. But most of the big, 70, 80, 100-foot draggers are going to be owned by corporations at this point. Multiple boats under the same flag.
And we're here today talking about a specific case that involved the Emmy Rose, which sank. 4 crew members died. You represented one of the families. Tell our audience about Michael Porper, who was your client, and his family.
Michael was born and raised in Gloucester, Massachusetts, to a fishing family. And he went, as so many families did before, it's a family tradition to go into the industry, and he did too. And he fished on a lot of boats. He fished here, he fished in Maine. Michael was the proud father of 2 girls, one who's now 4 and one who's now 16 years old. At the time they lost their dad, they were 2 and 14 years old. He, like so many people in our city's rich history, was a proud fisherman who loved his life at sea, who loved his girls, was fond of saying when he would call into shore from the boat on the way in, would be fond of saying he couldn't wait to come see his girls. And like a lot of people in Gloucester's history, unfortunately, we lost him at sea.
What exactly happened that you know of right now that the case uncovered?
The National Transportation Safety Board just released some findings. We have public records requests, FOIA requests out for their investigatory materials to find out more specifics. But what we understand happened now, according to them, is that there was some problems with some of the watertight doors on the vessel that allowed the intrusion of water into what is called the lazarette, and caused the vessel to list starboard side, and ultimately capsize and sink. And that happened about 25 miles off the coast of Provincetown in about 800 feet of water in November. So frigid water.
And the boat was finally recovered a few months later. 6 months later, was it?
It took a while, but they found the vessel. And then within about a year after the incident, they sent a rover down to do some video and take some photos of it. So they located it. It's still at the bottom of the ocean. They haven't recovered anything.
In these type of cases, what were the legal strategies used by both sides and the challenges you encountered?
So we'll start with the challenges. The vessel was owned by a corporation, Boat Aaron and Melissa Inc. And that's all the corporation owned to our investigation, is that they own the vessel. And the vessel was insured by a $1 million insurance policy for liability. And unfortunately, that was grossly underinsured. It was an 82-foot steel dragger, and there were 4 crew members on the boat, and all of them were lost at sea. So their families are now without their loved one, without the income that their loved one would have brought to the table, and of course, so many other types of damages that result from losing your father at sea or your fiance at sea. So the problems we faced logistically are the boats at the bottom of the ocean. All the witnesses died or were lost at sea, so we can't ask them what happened. We had very limited radio communications with the shore. The last communication that we were aware of was at 9:30 p.m. the night before. The vessel went down around 1:30 in the morning, the next early morning, so far as we can tell from the EPIRB that alerted the Coast Guard there was a problem. And they were heading into Gloucester with a full boat. They had fish, they had a great catch, and they were heading in to offload. Logistically speaking, when you have 4 deceased fishermen lost at sea, and you have a limited insurance policy, everyone wants a piece of the same pie. And the only compensation you can get is money. It's the only remedy our system can give you. So it was problematic, because we didn't have answers about what happened. There wasn't sufficient money out there to compensate all these families for the loss of their loved ones. And on top of that, we had what they call a drawdown, or a defense within limits policy, meaning anyone who sued the vessel, the defense attorneys would be paid out of that same policy, and it would draw down. So if the defense attorney was paid $1 for their time, that would come out of that $1 million policy that was only there for compensating these families. So we had a lot of logistical issues.
I've seen cases where the lawyers end up eating up and using up the entire money. There's no money left for the families at the end, but that wasn't the case here, was it?
Thankfully, no. The vessel owners and the defense attorney, of course, after advising all of the plaintiffs or the claimants about what the insurance policy limits were, and then to an extent cooperating with our investigation about trying to see if there were other assets in the corporation, ultimately we determined really that there wasn't. And it was not just my firm. There was 3 other attorneys representing the other 3 families that were working in concert to try to figure this out. And we realized that this insurance policy was all that these families were going to get their hands on in compensation for what they lost. And even that wasn't going to be compensation. Even if they were fully financially compensated, they weren't going to bring back their loved one. So we had an issue. Thankfully, the defense offered the vast majority of that policy after some relatively minor legal fees in the grand scheme of it to the families, and then basically put it on us to figure out how to divide it.
Right, and then of course the case was settled, correct?
Ultimately, we submitted the case to consent judgment with a federal judge, and submitted our evidence, and the judge decided how it would be divided. The settlement fund would be divided.
We had talked before the show about some statutes on the books that need to change to increase the protection that fishermen should have when they go out in this dangerous mission of fishing these days. What is that statute?
So the problem in this case was the Limitations of Liability Act, 1851 statute. And at the time they passed it, the premise was to protect the significant, economics of the industry, the seagoing industry. They wanted to protect vessel owners because that was a huge, huge part of our economy. So a plaintiff would be limited to what they could collect for damages up to the value of the vessel itself. Of course, it's a bit of an antiquated statute, and it also allows corporations to limit their liability to, in this case, 4 families, all of whom had more damages than the $1 million insurance policy by themselves, let alone 4 families vying for a piece of that same pie.
Right, loss of income, most importantly.
The pecuniary loss standard in the Death on the High Seas Act, which is the other statute that applies here, it limits the recovery of the family to the pecuniary losses of the estate. So what the family would have benefited from the ongoing workings during the work life of the fisherman. And so it's already limited to an extent, but this Limitations Act allowed the vessel and the insurer to limit it further. So it was unfortunate.
So today, fortunately, we have Michael's daughter and his fiancée. We're going to bring them on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Maya, Michael's daughter, to the show. Welcome to the show, Maya.
Thank you.
Tell our audience a little bit about your dad. What do you remember your dad?
My dad was an amazing guy. He loved his kids more than anything. Fishing was his, spirit animal, if I could put it that way. He would do anything in the world for anybody. He would give his shirt, the shirt off his back to anybody. He was just amazing in so many different ways, and he really loved me, and I loved him more than anything, and I wish he was here today, but unfortunately he's not.
What are some of your fondest memories of you and your dad?
Me and my dad, we had so many amazing memories. Fishing together, going to the playground, that was always my favorite. There's this playground in Gloucester that we would go to with the swing, and it was like a circle, and he would always get in it with me, but somehow his little self would push both of us so high, and I just remember being on that swing with him, just hoping he stays with me forever.
Take us back to the day that you found out that the vessel had gone down.
That morning, I got a phone call from his fiancée that the vessel had went down, and I completely just went blank. I dropped to the floor and I started screaming, and I did not know what to do. But then my heart kept telling me, Maya, remember what he said. And what he said was, if I ever pass away, I want to be in the ocean, the place I love the most. So in my heart, of course, I was absolutely destroyed. But at the same time, I knew he passed away doing what he loved.
Joe Orlando Jr., your lawyer, tell our audience the job that he did for you and your family.
Joe has been great. He's helped a lot. It's just with the boat sinking, of course, with any family that's lost a member on a fishing boat, it's hard to get closure, especially if the bodies were not found. But Joe's been by our side and has helped us through a lot. He's been a great guy, and I appreciate that.
One last question. How are you doing today?
Today, I'm trying, and I'm living. And of course, I still miss my dad, but with his loss, it did take a huge toll. I started having seizures a few weeks after he passed away, and that has still happening up until this day, and that's just a huge thing. And just missing him kills me all the time because I don't have him here. I haven't You know, I didn't get to see his body. Like, I just miss him a lot. That was my dad. And I'll never see him again. And that's what kills me the most every single day. But I know he's always with me. And that's what I have to think about, because it's hard.
Right, and he wants the best for you, and you now have a purpose in your life.
Yeah.
To aspire to be the best that you can be, because that's what he would like to see.
He would love, like, if he was here, he would be so proud of me. He always was proud of me. And, like, I worked all summer. He would have been just so proud. And I wish he was here to see that. But he's not. But somewhere he is, if that makes sense.
I want to thank you very much for spending time with us, and my condolences to you.
Thank you.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Ashley Gross, Michael's fiance. Welcome to the show, Ashley.
Thank you.
Tell our audience a little bit about Michael. What do you remember best about him?
His heart of gold, that he was a good dad. He always had like a pep in his step. People called him Porps. He's always had a smile on his face. You know, he always saw the good in people, those kind of things.
What were some of the favorite things that you and he used to like to do?
Bring Grace fishing or like any outdoor activity, arts and crafts with her, just spend time as a family.
Take us back to the day when you found out that the vessel had gone down. What were your thoughts?
My thought was it was Michael calling me. So the captain, Bobby, I've also known a long time, and him and his wife have almost identical numbers. And sometimes if Mike didn't have service from his phone, he would call from Bobby's phone. So it was 5:30, 6 in the morning. You know, it was like the 7th day. So I'm like, oh, it's Mike calling. I missed the first call. It started to wake me up. The second call, I'm like, oh, they must be on their way in. And I answered, and it was Annie. And she told me what happened, and I just never forget it. Like, my daughter's 4, she was 2 then, she still remembers it. Like, it still feels unreal. I feel like he's still gonna walk through the door any minute. But yeah, you definitely, like, I grew up on an island in Maine, so I have family, friends, they all fish. You never think it's gonna be you. Like, that's not even a fear. I mean, obviously it's always like in the back of your brain, but it's not a real fear. Like, that's not something that I was ever worried about. A lot of times I felt like he was more safe out to sea.
How are you doing today?
You know, doing all right. It's definitely had the ups and downs. You know, Mike was our financial supporter. I waitress and bartend. And so in Maine, that's only good in the summer, really. And fishing kind of isn't that great in the summer. And then in the winter, fishing's great and waitressing, you know, isn't. So I would stay home with the baby. So just having to try to find a new routine, working all the time, getting Grace into daycare, and doing it alone is scary.
Oftentimes, life gives us challenges like this, and oftentimes we need good lawyers to help us get through things that we don't even know about. After this law firm and after Joe Orlando Jr. helped your firm out, what would you have to say about it?
He saved my life. He definitely walked me through it. Him and his family were very kind to mine. You know, we were able to get through it cordially, as fast as possible. Really, our main objective, I felt like at first, was just to find answers. It had nothing to do with money or insurance money or whatever the case may be. It was to try to find out what happened to them.
And that's still ongoing, as you know.
As I know, yes. As of like, what, 4 days ago? Yeah. It's just hard because it's like, you think it's like over, and then there's like still like, it's like, at the end of the day, I mean, it's not going to bring him back, and that's what I had to like keep telling myself. Because at first, like every time the Coast Guard would call, like I was just a puddle. I was a mess, you know? Because you never know if it's going to be good or bad. Like those first 2 days, they could, like, I didn't know if we were going to walk in and they were going to be sitting there.
Well, I want to thank you very much for being on the show and coming here. I really appreciate it. Anything else you want to say about Michael?
He died. He died doing what he loved, and I don't think anyone could be more proud of him.
Well, you have my sincere condolences. And again, thank you for spending time with us.
You're welcome.
This particular type of case is regulated by the Jones Act, isn't it? Tell our audience a little bit about what is the Jones Act, who's responsible under the Jones Act, et cetera.
Okay, so the Jones Act, it's a nickname actually. The official name of the act is the Merchant Marine Act of 1920. And what this does is it permits a seaman, a fisherman in this case, to bring an action against the vessel in negligence. Also, you can bring an unseaworthiness claim, and you're entitled to maintenance and cure benefits under Admiralty law. But the Jones Act is a very powerful statute that protects the rights of fishermen who, it's the most dangerous job on the planet, who get hurt very often. And they're allowed to bring an action against the vessel, the employer, based in negligence and gross negligence. And in this case, Michael Porper had what we call a survival remedy. He survived for a certain amount of time after the boat started to sink. And his conscious pain and suffering during that time period is also compensable. So the Jones Act fits into this case in that respect. But he had a survival action.
But it is limited by the insurance cap, isn't it?
It is. In this case, because of the Limitations of Liability Act, and because of the insurance policy limits and the fact that it was a drawdown insurance policy, limited the recovery the family could make.
Is there any way around this? Should the law be changed?
I think Congress has to act on this. It's an antiquated statute. It needs to be remedied. Of course, seagoing economy is very important to our country, but we have people doing very dangerous jobs and their families are left out to dry if something horrible happens. And, you know, the NTSB in this case in their investigation issued findings and recommendations. And they also cited cases in 2015, the El Faro disaster, which is a very famous maritime case at this point. And this is on a smaller version of the same thing. You have a lot of seagoing workers who are dead or lost at sea, who their families can't make a recovery because of this.
We know there's an ongoing investigation, and you may find out some additional problems with that vessel, and of course you'll take legal action on that. Congratulations on what's been done so far, and thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely. We look forward to further investigating this matter and hopefully getting more compensation for our clients.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.